As you may know, our motto here at Fab Fertile is test, don't guess. And definitely check out last week's episode where we reviewed the Dutch test and why that's an essential tool and test to use during your fertility journey, as well as the week before where we talk about food sensitivity testing. So today we are digging into stool testing. And this is probably the last place people would think to look when they're on the fertility journey. I would say the majority of people we work with, we find some sort of gut infection. And if there's an infection in your body, be it a parasite, a worm, a bacterial infection, a fungal infection that is causing stress on your body. And again, your body wants to survive, not procreate. We regularly see these gut infections. So today we are digging into stool testing, why this is an essential tool when you're on the fertility journey. Hey there. Thanks so much for listening to the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. And I've got a favor to ask you. If you are enjoying learning about the functional approach to fertility, consider going to iTunes and rating and reviewing the podcast. This is how it helps the show reach more people that are struggling with infertility, knowing that there's another approach that really can get to the bottom of why it's not working in the first place. So all you need to do is, if you're on the app or the desktop, just go in and consider leaving a 5-star rating and leave a review. And there is step-by-step instructions in the show notes showing you exactly how to do that. So if you can just take a few minutes, just take the few minutes right now. You can pause this recording, come back, leave the review. It would really mean the world to me and help others that are on the fertility journey as well. Take care. Hey there. I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call is for action takers. And really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to Fab Fertile, FABfertile.com and click on book a free call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's Fab Fertile, FABfertile.com, and click on book a free call. One theme that keeps coming up with the couples in our Fab Fertile Couples Coaching Program is sleep. Whether it's insomnia, having a hard time falling asleep, waking up at night, or feeling tired when we wake up, sleep is critical for fertility and hormones. And that's why I'm so excited to have Blue Blocks as our podcast sponsor. So we're exposed to blue and green light from our phones, our tablets, our computers, indoor lights, and more. And this exposure impacts our melatonin production. And melatonin is essential for both female and male fertility. It helps determine the frequency and duration of our cycle and impacts sperm. There's lots of blue light blocking glasses on the market, but the ones from Blue Blocks, they've actually compared other popular brands, and Blue Blocks block 100% of blue and green light while other brands fall short. So I have their sleep glasses. They have red lenses, and the ones I have are a little translucent frame, and they're so stylish and really cool. And so they eliminate 100% of the blue and green light in the 400 nanometer to 550 nanometer range. So this is exact range that has been shown in clinical studies to disrupt melatonin and negatively impact your sleep. So all you do is wear your sleep glasses after sunset until it's time for bed, and you'll notice improved sleep after just one use. And it's also cool to use when you're flying for managing jet lag. So I got to say I was a little skeptical about the noticing improvement after one use, but literally I use these glasses and my sleep is actually already pretty good. I used them for one day, and I have to say after one day, I had the best sleep of my life. I just felt so rested. So these glasses, they ship free and they're tracked for all orders anywhere in the world. And also they have all their frames come in prescription, non-prescription, and reading glasses. Plus you can send in your frames and they'll add the blue light blocking and green light blocking lenses to your frame. So this is an easy hack that you can add to your fertility toolkit. All you do is go to BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com. Use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast at checkout and receive a 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast to receive your 15% discount. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently, restored. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under.
Many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's often merely an assumption that's not based on actual evidence. The reason being that there is no direct test of egg quality. You can't test egg quality.
It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or he has a zinc deficiency.
Like there can be a root cause to these symptoms that are, quote unquote, period problems, that the doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
And some part of you knows that if you can reframe your journey from not want to struggle, or if it is struggle, learn how to embrace the struggle. Learn how to embrace it.
Most conditions in the child occur during the 9 months of development. It's the genetic switches are turned on or turned off, and they're pre-programmed. So you are in such a powerful, amazing position to do amazing things for your kids.
Why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark, and my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Brandy Buskow back to the podcast, and we're digging into the stool test and what it means for fertility. So definitely check out episode number 6 for a functional medicine 101 talk, plus a look at some of the tools we use to help couples conceive. So Brandy Buskow is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, certified transformational health coach, and an EFT practitioner, so emotional freedom technique practitioner. She loves supporting women so they can learn how functional medicine addresses the root cause of disease or illness. And before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this to make sure you never miss an episode. Hey, Brandy, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So today we're digging into poop, which is always fun. But yeah, this is one of the with stool testing where a lot of conventional doctors will really look at a stool test, probably either not at all or as the very last thing to consider. So we really wanted to, this is when we do our couples coaching program, we look at a food sensitivity test, we look at a hormone test using the Dutch test, and we look at a stool test. So we're going to go through today some of the different stool tests, and we'll talk about the one that we like and why. So anything to say before we jump in, Brandy?
No, stool testing, it's one of my favorite things that we look at because we can usually find a lot of healing opportunities with our stool testing.
Awesome. Okay, so let's kind of go through. So the first one we have is the BioHealth 401H. And why? What's the that one?
So the BioHealth 401H is a great test. It's a test that's actually been around for a really long time. BioHealth is a really well-established lab, and they use a couple of different methods in their testing. So they use things like microscopy. So they're actually taking the stool, looking at it under a microscope to see if they could find any pathogens. They're doing like growing. So what they're doing is they're taking it and putting it in petri dishes to see if there's any sort of fungal overgrowth. And then they use another method where they're applying a solution to the stool that's also going to help to see if they can find it under special lighting to see if they see any pathogens. And so with the BioHealth test, like I said, it has been around for a very long time. It doesn't just look for a set specific markers or specific pathogens. It's good in the fact that because it looks for everything, that there could be some odd ones that other tests don't look at that may pop up on the 401H. The thing with the 401H is it is a 3-day stool collection. So in order for it to be more accurate, you do need to collect your stool over 3 days. And the reason for that is because whenever you're having a bowel movement, and if you have a bacterial infection or a fungal infection or parasite, you may not always be shedding the pathogen in your stool every time. So that's why they have you collect over 3 days. So the BioHealth test is a pretty good, accurate test that's been around for a really long time. It's got a lot of good technology behind it and a really reputable company that offers the 401H.
Okay. Anything that we don't like about it?
So one of the problems with the 401H, like I said, is because it is a 3-day stool collection, so it's a little bit more cumbersome. And because it's also they need to have you to actually expelling the pathogens in your stool to find it, one of the benefits, or one of the things that you should be doing if you're doing a 401H or any type of stool test that requires microscopy, or they're not looking at the DNA of the stool, is that you should be taking a biofilm disruptor. That's going to increase your odds of starting to shed some of the pathogens into your stool. And for some people, they don't want to have to do that for 2 weeks. Generally, it's recommended you take it for at least 2 weeks before you do your stool collection. So it's a little bit more involved. You're taking a biofilm disruptor for 2 weeks. Then you have to collect 3 stool samples and then send it back to the lab. So we tend to go with other tests. The one we like, which we'll talk about next, is the GI map from Diagnostic Solutions. And the reason for that is there is no reason you don't need to be taking a biofilm disruptor for 2 weeks. It's only one stool collection. And this test is newer technology that is looking at the DNA of pathogens in your stool. And it is the first FDA approved test that's using this technology. That's why we like the GI map, because it's definitely easier for our clients to collect, and it has a higher rate of finding or detecting things because of the technology that it is using. And it also has a lot of really great gut markers on it that we are looking at that a lot of other stool tests don't offer.
Yeah, so that's the GI map, and that's the one that we use as part of our couples coaching program when we run stool tests. And the GI map it's shipped, it's drop shipped internationally. So if that's something you want to look at, we could drop ship that, and then we could do a consult, or it's also part of the couples coaching program. But yeah, as Brandy was saying, compared to the biohealth, it's not as cumbersome. There's a few, we like to review it with the Dutch test. That's probably the only thing that, because it gives us better clues when we look at the two of them together. But as far as ease, it's one of the easier ones to do. Now, the DRG laboratory.
For sure. We really like that one. So the DRG laboratory is using similar technology to the GI map. Like I said, Diagnostic Solutions was the first company to come out with the technology and get approval from the FDA. So DRG is using similar technology. Problem with the DRG is that it's really expensive. So it does have almost all of the same markers as the GI map, but it's almost twice the price. And so for that respect, it's a test that we don't recommend just because it's cost prohibitive, and it's just, we've seen a lot more success, more validity, a lot more consistency with Diagnostic Solutions and the GI map.
Okay, so that was DRG laboratory. And one that we often see people that if they are getting stool testing is they come in with the Genova test. And I just wanted to have you talk about that one and why that test may not be as effective at catching some of the other gut infections that the GI map does.
Sure. So one of the ones that was actually run a lot by a lot of functional medicine doctors and naturopaths is the GI effects from Genova. And at the time when this test came out, it was new technology and it was kind of leading edge. But unfortunately, that was a while ago. And there's a lot newer technology and better testing methods out there that have come about since the GI effects test. And I've just seen from learning from my mentors and some of the clinical advisors that I've worked with, we've just seen that the GI effects isn't as accurate as it could be. And it tends to miss infections or miss clues that when we're working with clients, we have a client coming to us with a lot of GI distress or GI symptoms, and the Genova GI facts may come back clean, and it just hasn't been correlating very well. So we tend to really like I said, stick with the Diagnostic Solutions GI map. It is the newer technology. It tends to be more reliable, and the GI facts is just older technology and isn't quite up to par as some of the newer tests that are coming out on the market.
And then, so let's go through the GI map and sort of hit on some of the things that we typically find when we review these with our clients. Obviously, it's different for everyone, but sort of some of the ones that we're typically seeing as we run the test. So let's talk about H. pylori and why that's important.
So H. pylori is an infection that can be fairly common. It's something that can be passed via saliva. So it tends to be one that can be passed easily between family members, between spouses. And the reason, we all have a certain degree of H. pylori in our guts, that is, it can be known, or some circles may say it's a normal bacteria that is there. But the problem arises is when it starts to overgrow and it gets out of hand, and then it starts to have different virulence factors. So the virulence factors basically mean it's a more aggressive type of H. pylori. And so the GI map does give you clues and tells you if it has the different virulence factors, meaning it's more aggressive. And the thing with H. pylori is it has been tied to a lot of different things like acid reflux.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that a lot of people commonly have. And they have acid reflux and they think it's because they have too much stomach acid, when in fact, if you have H. pylori, it's the opposite. The stomach acid's not too high. What happens is your stomach acid is too low. And so whenever you're eating food and your stomach acid is too low, it's not going to, the stomach acid is what signals the valve in your esophagus to close when you've eaten food. And so if your stomach acid isn't high enough to trigger that, it will become weak and stay open slightly, causing some of the acid that you do have in your stomach to come back up and cause that acid reflux. And H. pylori lowers the stomach acid in the gut. It thrives on low stomach acid. So this is really common to see with people who have acid reflux, that it may not just be acid reflux and you need a proton pump inhibitor or acid reducing medications, but it's that you maybe have this bacterial infection. H. pylori has also been associated with things like ulcers. So there used to be a time when doctors would think if you had an ulcer, it was because of stress, but it's actually been found recently in studies that it's actually H. pylori is being really highly tied to ulcers. And the infection can, if left untreated for a very long time and you start to begin to get ulcers, can damage the gut, leading to stomach cancer. So it has been associated in some cases of stomach cancer. So it's definitely something that if we do find it in high amounts on your GI map and you have the virulence factors, definitely something that you want to address and you want to get rid of. And if you do have it, you also really want to take a look at the members of your family, because like I said before, it's very easily transmitted via saliva. And so we always make the recommendation, if one spouse has it, we generally recommend both spouses address it and do the gut healing. And if there's children involved, we may want to look at the children, and even pets, because pets can pass it along as well.
When your little puppy is licking your face, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and actually, so with the acid reflux, there's a number of people we work with, as well as I was actually just talking to someone yesterday, and she has low AMH, high FSH. She'd gone gluten-free, and then she just was still experiencing this acid reflux, which, in functional medicine, that's a clue to dig deeper. And sometimes people think it's not connected to infertility, but if you've got a gut infection, overgrowth of H. pylori, and some other things going on in there, there's a reason that your body wants to survive and not procreate.
Right. And some of the other things, we said acid reflux, but a lot of people might mistake and think, well, I don't have any digestive upset and I don't have acid reflux, so I must not have H. pylori. And that's definitely not the case, because there's a lot of times we see people that don't have those symptoms and do have H. pylori. What they do have is they have symptoms of low nutrients. So they're not absorbing things like low vitamin B12, low vitamin D, low iron. That's really common with H. pylori. Mood changes. So things like anxiety, depression, low moods, those could also be symptoms of H. pylori, because essentially the H. pylori is making it that you're not able to break down and digest the foods that you're eating. And so if you're not able to break those down and digest them, you're going to be missing the key nutrients that are going to lead to things like nutrient deficiencies, things like low neurotransmitters that are going to lead to things like anxiety and depression. So it's not just digestive symptoms that we see. We commonly see other symptoms involved with H. pylori.
Yeah, and that was the case for me. I had H. pylori. I had no digestive symptoms, nothing, but it was there. So it was a little bit shocking, because as you're saying, we typically think there's got to be, digestive issues going on or acid reflux. Okay, so let's dig into parasites. So a lot of the time, especially we find people with unexplained infertility, they come back with multiple parasites, which to us is not unexplained. And also people with, same with low ovarian reserve, low AMH, high FSH, coming back with parasites and also if you fibroids, endometriosis, all of these things. So sort of we did a podcast a while ago there with Reed Davis, and we talked about not focusing on your diagnosis, and because we get stuck on that diagnosis, whereas in functional medicine we're digging deeper. So in this case, looking at some of the parasites that we find here. So one of the first ones I want to talk about was the Blastocyst hominis.
Yeah, so we just talked about H.Pylori. And actually, Blastocyst hominis very commonly is seen alongside H. pylori. Those are two pathogens that tend to kind of go hand in hand. And so sometimes we will get the results back and we'll see somebody has Blastocyst hominis and H. pylori, but most of the time we don't see it, and we'll either find Blastocyst hominis first, we address it, we do a retest, then we find H. pylori, or inversely, we'll find H. pylori, address the H. pylori, and then retest and find Blastocyst hominis. So again, this is, I don't like to say common because I don't like saying, well, it's normal for everybody to have parasites, but unfortunately, it is becoming more common that people are getting things like parasites and bad bacterial overgrowth, and it's not because they've gone to third world countries where there's no sanitation. It is happening with people in North America that haven't traveled. Blastocyst hominis, it can be common. It luckily, there are definitely a lot of different ways to eradicate it and to get rid of it. That's a good thing, but it can go hand in hand with some other parasites that aren't as easy to get rid of. So things like Cryptosporidium, that is one that's pretty, can be pretty nasty. It's not really good to have. Some other ones that we've seen a few times is Entamoeba histolytica. That one is really highly tied to colitis, so it causes a lot of inflammation in the gut and damage to the gut. That one is another one. Not common, but we have seen it. Mm-hmm. Giardia is another really nasty parasite, really something that unfortunately we've seen a few times. Yep. But we are seeing more and more people come back with Giardia, which again is not good. It causes the nutrient deficiencies, it causes inflammation in the gut, it causes you to not be able to stomach pain, mood, skin, joints, fertility. All of these things are affected by having these infections, and you don't have to have traveled outside of the US to get these. So these are some common parasitic pathogens that we find on the GI map.
What about, there's Klebsiella and Citrobacter, which are some autoimmune triggers. So we those as well.
There is a group of bacteria that what we call, they are known to trigger autoimmunity. So just because you have this bacteria, it doesn't mean you have an autoimmune disorder, but these bacteria have been seen in studies to be triggers or be associated with certain autoimmune conditions. So Citrobacter is actually really commonly seen with people with rheumatoid arthritis. Klebsiella is actually pretty commonly seen in things like Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, ankylosing spondylosis. So a lot of arthritic type conditions. It's also been seen in things like celiac and Hashimoto's, so autoimmune thyroiditis. And then we have some other autoimmune triggers, things like Prevotella, Proteus. These are some bacteria that have been associated with autoimmunity. So if you have one of those that come up, you definitely want to make sure you address it, because you don't want it to be sitting there in your gut overgrowing for long periods of time, and that becomes one of these stressors that could trigger some sort of autoimmune disorder.
Yeah, another one we see quite frequently is streptococcus, and this is something that actually I had that showed up in my GI map, and I had constant strep throat for years and years and years, and then because my immune system was so low, and then I changed my diet, and then thought everything was okay. Take the GI map test, and the streptococcus is there. Yeah, what's your take on that one?
Yeah, so this is one that we actually do commonly see in a lot of people, because all of us have been exposed at some point to strep. Now, whether or not we get strep throat or we get something from it, that doesn't always happen. It's going to depend on your genetic makeup and your immune system at the time. But most of us have been exposed to it. And so it's something that we actually do commonly see in the gut. And high levels of streptococcus, so when it is high, that's when it's flagged on a GI map. High levels of streptococcus can be associated with things like low stomach acid, constipation, SIBO, inflammation in the gut, mood disorders. It can be really highly associated with high and low moods, things like OCD, anger, nutrient deficiencies. There's so many things that it can be associated with. And actually, streptococcus is a strain that has been seen in higher amounts in some people who are sensitive to gluten. So not necessarily, having celiac, but non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So it's one that we actually see pretty commonly in people who do have a sensitivity to gluten. So it's another clue that we see that if we see high amounts of that and we see a lot of other things going on, we may think, okay, maybe this person really is reacting to gluten, and that could be another stressor along with the streptococcus and along with maybe some other bacteria or parasites that we find on the stool test that are all working together to create this stress on the body that really needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and that was the case for me with the H.Pylori and the streptococcus, and then I have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. And also the next one that we're going to talk about here, fungus and yeast. And I think a lot of us have heard about the candida and the candida diet. I think many times people will go and attack the candida first, whereas when we do our gut healing protocol, we look at candida, fungus, yeast last because it's very opportunistic. So Brandy, what's your take there?
Yeah, so there's a couple things about fungus and yeast. One thing to know is that it can be sometimes hard to find fungal infections in stool. So especially in something like a 401H where they're actually looking at under microscopy or they're seeing if it will grow in the petri dish, it's one of those things that's really hard to grow from stool. So if you do find high levels of a fungus or a yeast, then you definitely know that it is an issue for you. But the other thing, like you said, opportunistic, is that fungus and yeasts are opportunistic. So what that means is that when the environment is ripe or when the environment is right for them, they will take advantage of it, and they'll take advantage of their environment and they'll begin to overgrow. And so an environment that would be ripe for fungus and yeast would be one where you don't have a good balance of good gut bacteria to keep your gut healthy and to keep all of the pathogens in check and keep them at low levels. So then you may start having some of these bacterial infections that we talked about. You may start to have overgrowth of something like E. coli or streptococcus or staphylococcus. And when those start to overgrow, they give off toxins, and the fungus and yeast feed off of those toxins and they continue to grow. Now, when that happens, you then again start to get leaky gut, you're not digesting your foods properly, you may be eating a diet that may be higher in carbohydrates or refined sugars. That will also make the overgrowth worse because they feed off of those things, they feed off of the sugars. And so it begins this cycle because once that fungus and yeast starts to overgrow, it will cause symptoms of things like fatigue, headaches, skin issues, food cravings are a big one. And so it's this cascade of all of these things that are going on. And so a lot of times what we might see is people will say, well, I did a candida cleanse and I felt okay for a little while, but it didn't really take care of the issue. And that's because it's opportunistic. And if the candida is there, there's usually other things there. And we need to take care of the other things first, do some gut healing, bring in some really good probiotics to repopulate the gut so that it can be strong, and then address the candida last. So that when you do take care of the candida, you've already cleaned up the environment so it doesn't have an opportunity to overgrow.
Yeah, and I had done all this work on candida, and I even was tested for candida on which I thought was a reputable test, and it came back that it was clear. My doctor's like, see, it's clear. And then I went and took the GI map test, and it's like, oh no, it's not. I'm like, okay, I'm not losing my mind. There is something here. But as we're saying, working on the other things first. and also, in conjunction with diet changes.
Yeah, and when we think of candida, we think of like, yeast infections or athlete's foot or thrush or things like that. But it can also, like I said before, all of those things, food cravings, headaches, tiredness, skin conditions, bloating, feeling just upset stomach after you eat. These are all things that can be associated with overgrowth of fungal and fungus or candida. And you really need to look further. So like you said, Sarah, there's so many people out there, or practitioners or tests out there that are telling you, oh, you have candida, that's the problem. It's usually not the only problem. There's usually a lot of other things going on underneath that definitely need to be looked for and addressed before you even think about addressing candida.
Absolutely. Okay, and another thing that we find on the GI map is it's a marker for the anti-gliadin. And can you maybe just talk, Brandy, about the difference when we do the LEAP MRT, the food sensitivity test, and why it's not the best marker for gluten, and then why the stool test is?
Yeah, so there are so many different ways to look for gluten, and there is no perfect test out there because there's so many ways that your body can react to wheat or to gluten. And so on the LEAP MRT, when they're looking at the test, they're only looking at one or two of the proteins found in wheat. And so not everybody is sensitive to those two proteins. In fact, there are over 60 different proteins in wheat. And so if you're only looking for two, the likelihood of you getting a false negative is pretty high because there are so many other types of proteins that you could be sensitive to or cross-reacting to that particular test isn't going to find. So we very rarely see wheat come up on an MRT food sensitivity test. And if you work with us, we'll always tell you that even though it says it's green and it's good, that doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. And we will have everybody eliminate gluten. But one of the things that's nice about the GI map is because it does look at anti-gliadin, it will give us some clues that if you say you're on a gluten-free diet or you don't think that you're reactive to it, it will actually give us some clues of how your immune system in the gut can be reacting to any gluten that you're being exposed to. So the anti-gliadin on the GI map is a measurement of the immune system reacting to the gluten protein in your gut. And if that is elevated, then that gluten or wheat that you're eating is causing inflammation and is causing the immune system in your gut to be on high alert. And so we always take all of the different factors. We take your symptoms, we have you do the elimination diet, we look at an MRT, and we look at the stool test, and we take all those factors together to get a picture of how sensitive you may be to gluten. And it's actually pretty common. We commonly see this marker high in a lot of people.
Yeah, and it may even be slightly elevated, but then the other marker is it calprotectin? The other marker is lower. So it's like, can you talk about that one?
Yeah, so the other marker is secretory IgA. So secretory IgA is an overall measurement of, and this is really generalized, but an overall measurement of the immune system of the gut. So not just relating to is the immune system reacting to gliadin, but this is the overall, how is the immune system in the gut doing? And so we actually pretty commonly see very low secretory IgA in people. And when it's low, that usually means that the gut and the immune system have been working really hard for a really long time to try to keep things in balance, to try to get rid of the pathogens that are in the gut. And I don't like to say a losing battle, but it can't keep up. It can't keep up with the demand of trying to battle what's going on in the gut and the unbalance, the low beneficial bacteria. And so if the immune system is weakened and it's because it's been trying so hard, your immune system's not going to be able to mount much of a response to the gluten if you are sensitive to it. And so if you have very low secretory IgA or very low immune markers of your gut, and then we also see the anti-gliadin, which is the gluten protein, and it's on the low end, but it's bordering on possibly being high. We're going to basically say that if your immune system was working optimally and it was as strong as it could be, the likelihood is that that marker of anti-gliadin would probably be pretty high. And the reason that it's low is just because your immune system is tired and it can't mount much of a response, and it's trying really hard, but it just can't muster the energy to fight back against the assault of the gluten that you could be exposed to. And we could see these numbers, if you're on a strict gluten-free diet, we could possibly see these numbers elevated because you were eating things that are cross-reactive to dairy. It's actually something that we commonly see. For instance, for myself, when I did my GI map, I have celiac. I had been gluten-free for 4 years, and my anti-gliadin was off the chart. And I thought, how is this possible? Like, I'm gluten-free, I'm celiac. And it turns out that there were some cross reactors in my diet that I wasn't aware of that were causing that elevation. So it's another way for us to dig even deeper to looking for some other things that could be causing some stress on your body, which is affecting your hormones and affecting your fertility.
Yeah, and check out episode 29 where we talk about autoimmune protocol diet and some of the cross reactors with gluten, which could be anything from oats to dairy to chocolate to instant coffee to even a lot of the gluten-free grains. So it is kind of to dig deeper, and sometimes gluten-free is just not enough.
Right. Yeah. So this is why one of the reasons, like we've talked about, why we really like the GI map, because it's not just looking at the pathogens and the bacteria, the fungus, the parasites, but it's also giving us some clues into how your immune system is doing and how the health of your gut is.
Yeah. And as far as calprotectin, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So calprotectin is actually, it's one of the more studied markers of gastrointestinal inflammation. So when calprotectin is high on the GI map, that's generally telling us that there's a lot of inflammation going on in the gut. And so we need to find out why, and we need to help bring that inflammation down. So we will commonly see high calprotectin numbers in people that have parasites, or somebody that comes back with H. pylori and say a lot of overgrowth of bacteria that could be causing a lot of inflammation in the gut, which is making that calprotectin number trend high. And so if we see very high numbers, we will always recommend that you go and see a GI specialist just to make sure that there's nothing else going on. And calprotectin, that number can easily be influenced. So you may do the stool test and it's really high, and then we'll do some work with you and you'll remove some of the foods that we found on your MRT, and you might retest with your doctor and your calprotectin will go back to normal. So that's a good sign, because that means that you have a lot of power to be able to reduce that inflammation in your gut really quickly.
Yeah, and then once we've got the results of the food sensitivity, the Dutch test for the hormones, and the GI map, we also look at your blood chemistry using functional reference ranges. And then we develop a customized, targeted protocol to heal. So we're going to take more of a herbal approach, more of a natural approach to this. If you were to take these results to your conventional doctor, they may recommend an antibiotic, an anti-parasitic, an antifungal, and then that's kind of like an atomic bomb going off in your body, and it'll get rid of the good bacteria as well as the bad bacteria. But in different situations, some of that may be necessary, so it's very customized. Can you talk a little bit about that, the functional versus the conventional route to heal?
Well, the conventional route, I like to call it like the approach that we take is the 4 R's. So we're removing the offending pathogens, so the bacteria, the H. pylori or the Giardia or whatever we find. And that's generally the only thing that your conventional doctor would do, is just give you the antiparasitic or the antibacterial or antibiotic and just do the 1 R, which is remove. But it's important that we address the other 3 R's. So there's remove, there's replace and re-inoculate. So we are replacing, when you take in even herbs, so even herbs can kill off a lot of your good gut bacteria. And so you need to make sure that if you're taking an antibiotic, an antiparasitic, or even herbal formulas that get rid of bacteria, that you need to replace and re-inoculate the gut with good gut bacteria. And that can also include replacing it with things like digestive enzymes and maybe some hydrochloric acid, so that you can really help your body to do what it's supposed to do. So in the instance of H. pylori, your hydrochloric acid, which is your stomach acid, is really low. And so after you've removed the H. pylori, you may need to do some work like adding in some bitters or some hydrochloric acid acid or maybe some apple cider vinegar to kind of help bump that level back up so that your stomach acid is back where it should be and it's digesting the foods properly and you're absorbing the foods properly. You also will have to help replace the bacteria by taking a very good quality probiotic for a few months, not for a couple of weeks. So that's part of the reinoculate phase. And then the last phase is the repair. And so the repair phase is where if you've had all of these pathogens in the gut, there's likely been an inflammation, there's likely been some damage done, and there's likely been a situation where you've had leaky gut, where the gut wall, the lining of the gut wall has become loose, or even microscopic tiny holes have been made in that gut wall because of the inflammation, causing larger particles of food to pass that shouldn't be. And so once you've removed the bacteria or the parasite or the fungal infection, you've been adding in some really good probiotics to balance that out, you need to repair that gut wall. And so we also do a repair protocol while you're removing the parasites, and we usually like to do it for at least 3 months afterwards so that we can really make sure that your gut is healthy and strong and has a really good balance of good gut bacteria, so that that is a major stressor that's been removed, and it allows your body to digest all the great foods that you're putting into it, be able to absorb all of those nutrients that you need, all of the fats that you need to make good hormones. So it's a 4-step approach that we take, and that anybody usually in functional medicine will take when they're addressing gut health. But when you're going to your doctor, they're just going to focus on the first R, the remove, and give you some high dose antibiotic or antiparasitic for 7 days, and that's it. So we take the approach of let's be proactive, let's make sure we do some gut healing. And I think I'd like to add in another one in there. We also retest. So that could be a 5th R, is retesting. And that's something that your doctor doesn't do. Is generally they'll say, okay, no, you're fine. There's no reason to retest and make sure that we got rid of it. But it is important to retest, because if you've done all of this work, you want to make sure that you've done all of this work and you've gotten rid of what we found in the first place, and make sure that nothing else came up.
Yeah, so remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, and retest is something that we always do at the end of our couples coaching program. And as I think we've talked about in previous episodes about the biofilms on some of these different pathogens, that as you begin to heal and remove them, you could find other things could rise to the surface, and then you would heal, do another targeted healing protocol. That's not always the case, but it's always good to test.
Yeah, it is not. And I mean, it's something that, we like to tell our couples to be prepared for, and know that it's not uncommon to retest and find more things. Like you said, Sarah, we've talked about the biofilms. And I mean, biofilms, they're good and bad. Biofilms are important because your good gut bacteria need them to communicate. But if there's too many biofilms, because there's a lot of different types of pathogens in the gut, what happens is it acts like a protective coating. And so if there's too many of them there may be some parasites or bacterial infections that we didn't find the first go around because they were buried underneath these biofilms and gone into hiding. So as we do this process of removing, repairing, reinoculating, we're removing some of those excess biofilms. We may find something else that was kind of buried deep down in your gut. But that's a good thing, because we've kind of taken it out of hiding and we know we can address it, and we're making pretty big strides on improving gut health.
Yeah, so let's talk about some of our strategies again to help with gut infections. Again, this is very customized. We recommend you work with a practitioner that specializes in functional medicine. Obviously, if you want to work with us, you can set up a free call and we can discuss. But let's talk about some of the different herbs and protocol that we use here to help with gut health. We will start off with L-glutamine.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways that we can do it. So I mean, L-glutamine would be something that we would use as part of the repair part of a protocol. So L-glutamine and some things like aloe vera, deglycerized licorice root, marshmallow root, okra, all of these things are things that help to repair the gut lining. And so things like aloe vera and deglycerized licorice root, marshmallow root, okra, those sorts of things, they're called mucigens. So they kind of create a little bit of a mucus in the gut, but what that mucus does is it lines the gut, it soothes the inflammation, and then it aids in the repair. So some of the things that we would also add into that repair would be things like glycine or collagen. So we recommend things like bone broth. Bone broth is really, really healing to the gut. It's really helpful. If you don't like bone broth, you could do something like collagen protein, which is a good option for a lot of people because a lot of the protein powders on the market are going to be derived from dairy, and a lot of people are sensitive to those. So we really like that. Or you could do a gelatin. So gelatin, you can make some gelatin gummies. You could add gelatin to soups. There's a lot of things that you can do with that. So those are some of the intestinal repair things that we might recommend for you to repair the gut after we've done a lot of removing and reinoculating.
And we like Vital Proteins for the collagen powder. I think you also got another one that you like now too.
Yeah, I'm a really big fan of the Ancient Nutrition line from Dr. Josh Axe. The reason I like that one is there's different types of collagen. So there's a few different types that do different things. And that one is a pretty broad spectrum collagen that has several of the types. I know the Vital Proteins, I think, has 3 types of collagen in it. So you want to make sure that if you are looking for a collagen supplement, buying the pills, I mean, I've seen them at Costco, and you're not really going to be getting as much of the benefit, but you want to make sure you're looking for something like a powder and that it's coming from a very high source, so grass-fed whenever possible. And that's really easy because there's a lot of good brands on the market that are specifically getting their collagen from grass-fed sources.
And then digestive enzymes, we touched on that a little bit, but
yeah, so that's going to be part of like the replace phase where you're helping to support digestion. We generally will recommend digestive enzymes for almost everyone. So the digestive enzymes are going to include things that are going to break down all of the different components. So you're going to want lactase for dairy. You're going to want something like protease for protein, amylase for carbohydrate, and then some of the other things you might find in a digestive enzyme is something like a oxbile or bentate hydrochloric acid or HCl. So if you have H. pylori, you definitely don't want to be taking a digestive enzyme that has HCl, but we will probably recommend you switching to one with HCl after we've verified that you've gotten rid of the H. pylori to help build those levels back up in the gut.
And then also with a probiotic, I've interviewed Kieran Christian, Dr. Kieran Christian. Is he doctor? No, it's Kieran Christian for the podcast, and we talk about, he's the designer for Megaspore, which is the probiotic that we like, which is a spore-based probiotic. So sorry, a spore-based probiotic. Delete the other thing. And so our favorite one is Megaspore.
Yes, Megaspore is it's an amazing product. Karan is a microbiologist that's been working with microbiome labs for a really long time. They've spent a lot of time formulating some really good products. They're actually coming out with prebiotics as well. And we really like the Megaspore. One of the biggest reasons we like the Megaspore is that you can take it alongside an antibiotic or an antimicrobial herbs or conventional, and it doesn't kill the spores. So that's a really big benefit, because otherwise a lot of the other probiotics, if you are taking it with an antibacterial or an antibiotic, you have to take it a few hours away from that, or that antimicrobial or antibiotic is going to kill the probiotic. So that's really why we really like the Megaspore. Megaspore also has a lot of studies behind it, how it's shown to increase beneficial bacteria, which is really important. We commonly see really low beneficial bacteria amount. And the other thing with the Megaspore is that it has been shown to help with gut healing. Now, there may be situations where we might recommend some different things, like something like a Saccharomyces boulardii. That's another probiotic that's really common and helpful. Saccharomyces boulardii is really helpful at helping to boost your immune system. So if your secretory IgA was really low, that Saccharomyces boulardii can help strengthen that. And Saccharomyces boulardii is actually really helpful for helping to address address candida or yeast overgrowth. So it works really well to kind of bring those pathogens into check. And so that's another type of probiotic that we might recommend for you as well.
Awesome. Anything else on the repair side of things that you'd like to discuss?
So part of the repair will be making sure that you're getting prebiotics. So those are things that are going to feed the good gut bacteria. And so you don't necessarily have to take a prebiotic supplement, but you're going to get prebiotics from the vegetables and the foods that you're eating. So, we always talk about having high quality foods, making sure you're eating lots of leafy greens. You may be adding in some starchy carbohydrates like sweet potatoes and squashes and things like that. And then also some of the fruits that you're eating, those are all going to have components in there that are considered prebiotics that will help to feed the good gut bacteria. So that's also going to be really important to rebalance the gut.
Awesome. So if you wanted to learn more about the GI map test and how it can be right for you, you can book a free consult. There's a link in the show notes, or you can go to fabfertile.com and just click on the link to book a free call. And thanks again, Brandy, for coming on and talking about one of our favorite topics here, the stool test.
Thank you.
If you are ready to order the GI Map stool test kit, all you need to do is go to the show notes, click on the stool test kit review. Once you do that, we will send you information about the actual kit. The kit is an additional charge. We ship these kits worldwide. So if stool testing is something that you're considering, just go to the show notes, click on the link, and then we will send you information about the kit. Melatonin is important for female fertility. It helps regulate hormones and maintain the body's circadian rhythms. Plus, it helps determine the frequency and duration of the menstrual cycle. Plus, it impacts sperm count and motility. Blue and green light negatively impact our melatonin production. That's why we recommend Blue Blocks, blue and green light sleep glasses to all our one-to-one clients. Simply go to BlueBlocks, BlueBlocks.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnant Podcast at checkout to receive your 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BlueBlocks.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnant Podcast. Hey there, I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery Call is for action takers, really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to fabfertile.com and click on Book a Free Call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's fabfertile.com and click on Book a Free Call. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.